Hello and good morning, everybody. How you doing? This is Jeremiah, and we are going to be going with some neat stuff with Excel, as we kind of covered in that previous webinar. Not necessary that you've seen it. We're just going to kind of keep going with some really neat things you can do in Excel. You don't have to be a programmer or whatnot, but of course we're going to be getting into some sort of programming stuff. But I mean, you'll kind of see. There's a lot that you can get done in Excel, and it makes a great companion to products like Land Effects. We're primarily going to be showing stuff like taking a Land Effects schedule into Excel and doing cool stuff with it. So get ready for some fun. I just want to point out a couple quick things in this little webinar interface here. Um, at the bottom, there's a Q&A button. I would recommend go ahead and just clicking that, getting that ready. I'm sure there's going to be some questions, so you want to be ready to type those in. But you can see in that little Q&A interface, you can also see the answers that have been typed out to anyone else's questions. So it's just a great companion as you're watching this webinar. And yes, this webinar is being recorded because you may well want to revisit some of this. So it'll be available on the website next week. That'll be great. So that's kind of everything I need to say. I see a good collection of smart people here. I can see you guys are the top tier of technical users. So I know we got a good audience for this. So very excited. I know we'll get some good questions on this, and so we definitely want that sort of feedback with what you use Excel for, what you want to use it for. So I'm sure that'll come. But yeah, so I'm done talking. I'm going to get this over to Jake so we can rock and roll.
Awesome. Thanks, Jer. So to clarify a little bit too, especially with how many questions I hope we get and think we're going to get on stuff is, what we're going to cover definitely is going to be a good structure of building blocks that you're going to be able to take back and apply to your schedules and different things. And since things are so dynamic and so, different from one firm to another, especially looking at this attendee list, we're going to have so many different questions that I don't know that I can show to be a one answer kind of thing for everybody's application here. So we are going to be covering a lot of key concepts and a lot of cool little building blocks that you can start plugging into your own schedules and stuff like that. As I started going and getting things together, it became much more apparent that that there's not going to be a right way to do stuff. So we want to make sure that we understand the fundamentals of the macros that we're going to kind of create and start to play with, but just giving you a lot of other tools going into these named ranges, dynamic named ranges, like how to actually start manipulating the data that you are going to be generating from Land Effects, and then being able to apply that kind of stuff, conditional formatting, and so on. So just a quick note, the example files that we do go over aren't going to be directly available for download, but if you guys are definitely interested in playing around with stuff, it wouldn't hurt to reach out to us and see what we can work out. But as far as actually having the files that I'm working on specifically, they will not be available. However, we are going to, as we talk about macros and inserting them into the ribbon and using those across the board, there's three specific ones that we'll play around with that we're happy to post if we get enough feedback on wanting those two. So without further ado, let's get rolling into this. So, just touching on macros and just understanding where and how they actually function and live. As we open up a new Excel workbook here, and this is a worksheet, we're going to want to start to record macros and stuff like that, but the way that those are recorded is very, very important. As we touched on in the last webinar about how to record a macro, this is the dialog box that actually pops up. as you start to give your macro a name so that it can start recording. But the most important part in this specific spot is where that macro is being stored, because that's going to completely dictate how that workbook functions, or that macro functions within the single workbook or across any workbook that you're working in. So just understanding that as a macro gets recorded, it does land in the VBA or the VBE, the Visual Basic Editor. They do land specifically here for you to manage and manipulate and tweak after the fact. So just understanding that if you do select personal macro workbook, it is going to land in this hidden workbook that when you open up Excel is going to be universally accessible from any workbook that you're working on specifically. But if you pick this workbook, which should be the default as you record a macro, it is going to be only available in that specific workbook that you are recording in. So just having that key concept or that understanding that where you save this macro is going to make a difference. To get just a little sense and navigation around the VBE itself, because we are going to be in here quite a bit, to pull this up, you can get to it from the developer tab. And again, I'm going to refer to the first video that we did on this, just in case you aren't familiar with some of these. But on the developer tab, you can click the Visual Basic Editor and get there. Alt F11 is a very, very useful key command to pop this guy up and go back and forth between Excel and your VBE. So understanding what you have open is also, again, important, because this will dictate where in the world you are actually tweaking things, which module you're in, which workbook you're in. It makes all the difference there. So this is where all of those books and projects will be open. You're going to see that if I have a separate workbook actually active, it'll show up here. And as well, your personal VBA project there is always going to be there no matter what, if you've actually recorded stuff and created that personal workbook. Your properties manager or dialog box is going to be really, really key when you start tweaking things and you start creating user forms and different modules and you want to rename things. This is where you're going to make those changes. I have added this immediate dialog here, and you can do that from the view dropdown. I also just recently added one to show the source code as it runs within your VBE, so you can see what results you're getting. But these are just additional views that you can see your code running as you start working those macros. A lot of cool little tools to make sure you have open. The tools to the left there are somewhat default, and this will help you be able to play or stop the actual macro directly from the VBE and see those changes there. And the tools from the right here were under, I added those from your edit toolbar from the drop down there. So being able to just quickly navigate and go through some of these things, it wouldn't hurt to start just poking around and playing with these and seeing what they do. But just as a common setup there, that's what we're going to kind of work with. This little guy here is, again, going to be more apparent when we start looking at this, but to be able to see the list of macros that you have in a specific module, either in all macros available or directly related to the specific macro that you're kind of editing at that point. Makes it a little bit cleaner. It cleans up things so that you know what you're in. So why are we using macros? Again, to hit this home just super hard, is macros are going to save you tons of time. No matter what the task is, if you're doing anything repetitive, there should be some type of way to expedite that, especially if it's an over and over and over kind of thing. So while they're really good, we do need to sort of take a step back and kind of just think a little bit about what we are trying to achieve. Do we have an end goal in mind? Do we have an outline about how we're going to get there? Because all of that is super important to make a really good macro and make it flexible enough to where it functions the way you want it, whether it's, am I thinking about it in one workbook specifically, or do I want this specific macro to work across any kind of, sheet that I make or create? Really important to think if there is a function that already exists. Excel already comes with a lot of pre-made tools to do a lot of really cool things. So make sure that you're not just recreating the wheel, but again, taking those tools that exist and combining them together with other tools that exist is, again, such a powerful tool, and how and where you would want to make that macro. We'll go into this a little bit, and you'll see this as we start to tweak our actual macros and stuff like that. But commenting or noting that code is super important, because if you're going to think about this, and we create some kind of code to do something, and we leave it dormant for, let's just say, a year, 2 years, 3 months, and you come back to that guy, you should be able to quickly know exactly what that macro is doing, because again, it's code. Some things might not be straight up English. You're going to want to know what in the world you were thinking when you made that. It's going to make it easier to copy and alter to improve it, or just to fix things. The recording part, again, we talked about in the first video. Do that as much as possible. I can't stress that enough. Make macros based on the recorded actions that you do. Look at those macros that it creates and start to tweak things. Start to understand what it was doing. As soon as you start to understand what it's doing, it's going to be easier for you to build on that and combine things together to make even more powerful macros. My biggest one is using those online resources. Being able to actually find specific macros that already exist. So talking about, does that function already exist? There's usually a macro that already exists, or people that are already looking to do something for what you're trying to do. So don't be afraid to go and look for legitimate resources to see how it is that they are doing that, because that's only going to sort of speed up that learning process. So I think the last thing that we want to talk about is which file format are we going to be using, especially thinking about this from a templates perspective and just creating these files. Which option do I choose? So these are some of the most common, and again, totally depends on the workflow that you're doing or the work that you're actually trying to do. It might need to be in one of these other formats, but as a standard file type is concerned, you got your XLSX, which is going to be the most up-to-date version of Excel. Then you've got the older version of Excel workbook that you might see out there, and then a CSV file is a pretty common one there. These three file types are going to be specifically for workbooks that you do that do not have macros. They can have formulas, they can have conditional formatting, they can do all kinds of other things, but your file type is going to prohibit the actual macro function stuff. The templates that you would use for those standard types would be your XLTX and your XLT. So again, being able to just set something up, save it as a template, and have it be a reoccurring, boilerplate pull from type of a thing without the macros, without any of that kind of fancy stuff. That's what you would be using. When we get into the macro enabled stuff, you're going to want to make sure that we're using the XLSM. And that's going to enable those macros. It's going to store those macros with that workbook. If you do not use that and you've created those macros, it will remove those macros and you will lose all your work on the macro side. Stuff in the cells will be there, but you are going to lose that actual additional functionality. And then the macro enable template is just the same, but with an M at the end there. So with that, I'm going to just remind everybody, let's make sure we get our questions in as they come up, no matter what they are. You know, we want to make sure that we're able to get to those in time, but we have a lot of stuff to get through. So we're going to just get rolling here. I want to show off just a few things, minor tools, again, to just show the power of what is within Excel. And what I want you to do is sort of think back to sheets that you might have already created or are thinking about creating, and see where you can maybe try to apply some of these. Because what I'm going to show is it basically just harnesses the cleanliness, the user-friendly portion of this, and just the navigation as a whole through everything. So the first one that I want to talk about is grouping, and what that actually is. So you're going to see just sort of in this guy here, pretty simple sheet here, and I've got some stuff that I'm showing here, but you're going to see these little plus signs, and the plus signs allow me to you know, use the rows as needed and structure this stuff, but maybe I just don't want to show that kind of content right there. Or again, being able to see additional entries here, but to collapse things to be able to fit like the overall goal of what I'm trying to show just as a lump sum sort of summary there, I can do that. What's nice about those groups is it generates a little 1 and a 2 here. So when I click those buttons, it will expand or collapse all groups here. So I don't have to just do one at a time, but I can click and it expands every one of those groups. Makes it really, really nice to do that. So how does a group work? And we're going to go over to the data tab. And depending on where I click, you're going to see these little brackets here that kind of follow you out there. And what this is going to do, so if I collapse this guy just to show you, the E column is actually still showing, okay, in this whole thing. So in order to be able to understand what it is that you want to collapse and still see, you know, the following stuff, is you're going to go from the start point of what you want to hide to the end point to what you want to hide, or leave the remaining column open, basically. And this, you're going to see those little dots there. That is what is hiding, allowing you to keep this little toggle button there. So we can go ahead and do this, and we're going to go ahead and I want to hide this entire high water use section here. So I'm going to go ahead and go clear to right here, and then I'm just going to click this group button. As soon as I highlight those columns and I click the group button, it'll actually pop in its own little guy here. So if I go ahead and I close him, it's going to close everything up until that medium water use, just like that. So I can collapse the subgroups, and you can see that it added that additional guy here. To remove, all I need to do is highlight those columns and hit ungroup, just like that. So super powerful, but what that allows you to do is not permanently hide columns, because what we could do is, if we didn't want to see stuff, and again, it depends on what you're going for, is we could simply just right click on those columns and hide them. But now I have no way to get back to those. I might forget that I did that, skip over it, and not know that there are cells referencing here. So just making it a lot cleaner and a lot more friendly to use is being able to use that group stuff. So I want to move to this guy here. you're going to see the same type of thing here in this example. So the one thing that I noticed as this was created is I've got a plus button here, but I don't know what in the world is there. So it looks like it is including everything, including the actual header. So again, if we're going to fix this guy, we can go ahead and take this guy, go to our data tab, ungroup him, start it where we want to hide, and go to where we want to end it, and group them together. And then when we go ahead and collapse this guy, he's going to be here. So then I can take, and if I wanted to, format this so it was a little bit more apparent that that was a header, and there is his information there. So it makes it really, really easy. Now going on to a couple other key ones here. How do we get those drop downs? And I know we talked about this just a teeny bit before, but it's a really important feature here. So what we have here is a data validation. And if we go to our data tab, and we have this right here, this data validation, you can see that we have a few different options. We can allow specific numbers, we can allow specific dates, we can allow just different unique items, and a condition that if there's something that goes outside of what we set up, that it can stop the user from putting things in. So it really harnesses that not allowing that miss data entry kind of stuff. So what I see here is we want to do a list, and the source is going to be what I want that list to be. Now, what I'm showing here is actually a hard-coded list, which again will work. But what if something changes? How do I know where to go to change that kind of stuff? And what if something gets added? How do I add to that list? I need to know where to go to manually be able to change this. So what I want to show is the ability to make it a little bit easier, and we're going to go into how we can use a named range for this and reference that specific stuff. So what we can do, I'm going to take just this column right here, I'm going to copy him, and I'm going to make an additional tab here. But this tab, and this is something as we start to set up workbooks, whether it's templates or specific sheets and templates for calculating things, I want to be able to have a reference to all the items within those other tabs that are going to potentially change, but that I can pull from easily. So I know that I go to my data validation tab. And this tab is specifically only for taking this kind of stuff here. And let's go ahead and put him in as a list this way. And again, we can clear all of our formats, you know, really, oops, clear formats, really start to make it a little bit more understanding or more legible in this respect. So this is the list that I would want to be able to add to or to be able to change. Instead of having it hard-coded here, somebody knows that if they need to change any type of drop-down, it would be in a specific central spot. So what I can do is I can go here, and we'll go ahead and we will take this source, and we're going to get rid of all of this guy here, and we are going to simply go over to this list here. So it's still the same list, but it's a lot cleaner in the sense that I can now go ahead and take this, change it if I needed to, and he's already updated automatically. Okay, so that's really nice, but what happens if I want to add additional item here? So let's go ahead and get him back and let's add him to the end. So now I go here and he's now a set range of cells there, and I cannot add him in there anymore. Well, we're going to, first we're going to talk about one additional thing here, and that's making a named range. We're going to make it even simpler. Okay, so I did a range from this data validation here. I did a range from A2 to A6, but what if I want to make it even more clear to what it is? All I need to do is to make a named range, and we're going to go ahead and come over to our formulas tab, and I want to go to my name manager. I can go to my name manager, or a really quick way to make a named range is to come right here. This reference point right here, this name box, just tells you where you're at, basically, in the cell that you're clicking on. So if I do this and select a bunch, and I come in here and I type pipe underscore size and hit enter, I have just defined this set of cells as pipe size, which means, and if I look in the name manager, here is my pipe size right here. And when I am anywhere else on the plan and I reference that name, it will go and highlight that spot. It's going to basically act as a reference, which means I can do the same thing here in my data validation. I can go ahead and I can equal that pipe size. And I can spell it out if I want to, if I remember what they are, or I can go ahead and hit F3. And that will bring up all potential names that I have defined in my name manager there. So I can pick him, I can say okay, and I can say okay. Now he's still there, but now he's looking at that specific group of cells there. But how do I make it add to the list? And here's where we're going to do our first little additional formula within, and using that existing kind of tool and combining it with something that it already exists here. So I'm going to take this time to tell everybody again, remind everybody that this is being recorded. So if you don't follow quite along, if you're trying to follow in Excel and doing this formula, just know that it's going to be recorded. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a different command here, and we're going to do an offset command. And this offset command is going to allow us to pick an anchor point. It's going to allow us to pick a row to start down on the first row there. We're not going to go any columns. And then we are going to count, use the counta formula in this whole entire section as like the lookup of that. And then we're going to do -1 because it's going to shift the selection up. So to kind of go over that one more time, we're offsetting and we're looking at a specific starting point, and we're shifting that down and then counting everything in the column and then subtracting that header out so that it gives us this. So now if I click it, you should see that this is giving you a preview in those little marching ants of where it's actually selecting. So we can try this out. Let's go ahead and do schedule 80. So nothing has changed. I haven't had to redefine my name manager or anything, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to click in here to see what it selects. and it found that additional item and it included it in the list, which makes it super cool when you have a lot of things that you need to that would actually potentially grow in here or get removed. So now I can go in here and say, okay, these guys are not a part of our stuff anymore. Come over here, and now you have the revised list. How much easier is that than trying to figure out where things were hard-coded? Even something as simple as I have seven days available here. And I'm going to go here and see that the source is 1 through 7. Well, let's just preemptively, it's not going to do anything yet, but I'm just going to say the source is days. And we're going to make a cell range of days. So we're going to say, okay, oh, it can't be found. Let's do, we're just going to have to say A1 right now. Okay, so let's go ahead and make a days section. So if we're going to go ahead and do this, and go to 7, I'm not going to do much typing from scratch again. I'm actually going to come to our name manager. I'm going to copy. This is the best way to make sure that when you know code is working, best way to make sure that you're not making any typos and stuff. But we're going to go ahead and we copied that guy and we're going to say new. We're going to say days. And this is going to be our formula. Okay. But obviously there's a key thing that we need to change, right? We need to make sure that we're looking in the right spot. So we're going to move him over and change all the A's basically to B's. And we can confirm that that works by just go ahead and select it. It selected what you have. Say close. And now if we come over here and we go ahead and do a data validation, we should be able to pick days. And we can see our list is here to choose from. Makes it way easier to know maybe I only wanted 4 days available. It's that easy. Somebody can come in here, understand what it is that we need to change, obviously with the proper highlighting and notes and rules for your workbooks, but in a nutshell, that is kind of how those named ranges and dynamic name ranges actually work. So we are going to go on to a little bit more of the conditional formatting. So another great way, let's see here, let's go ahead and come over here. Another great way to show clarity on the plan is by conditional formatting stuff. And you're going to notice that in this cell specifically, no matter what I try to fill this cell with, it's not filling. And you'd think, why in the world is it not actually filling when I tell it to do, that? Well, it's because it's actually a little formula that's working in the background. And you can see the little note that I have here. And the cell is actually going to turn red if it's less than 50% of the shade area. And it's going to turn green if it's more than 50% of the shade area. So you can see here that I've got 52% green for my shade calculations here. So why don't we do it here and we'll show how this actually works. I want to see if this percentage is greater than this percentage, then it should turn green as well. Or if it's less than this percentage, it should turn red. So this is what we call a conditional format on the specific cell that you've got highlighted. So I can come over, this one's on the home tab actually, and you have your conditional formatting. So there's a lot of already pre-built stuff here, but you can go as far as customizing a specific value and stuff like that. But what we're doing is just a greater than and a less than. So all we need to do is know that the cell, this 52% here, So format cells that are greater than, and we're going to go ahead and change that guy to number the cell A3, because we are formatting this cell that are greater than this. And it's going to turn, and we're going to customize this guy so that we can put a fill, and we'll just go ahead and put green and say OK. As soon as I hit OK, it's going to apply that conditional format. But if I change this guy, he's not going to do anything. He's just going to sort of be what it is as an original sort of cell there. And if I filled him in, he would do whatever I wanted it to do. He's not overtaking anything. But let's go ahead and put one more conditional format on there, and let's do the less than. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to still reference that same guy here. And if it's less than, we're going to go ahead and fill him with red. There you go. So now, anything that I change it to, it should either go red or green. So that's a really, really powerful thing as we're going through those. So same thing would be in something similar here. If I wanted to check whether my estimated water use was exceeding what my maximum allowed water use is, it will go ahead and flag that for me. I even have just a side little formula here just saying, hey, if this is doing this, if it's greater than that, it's going to just be blank. But if it's less than, or sorry, if it's less than the MAWA, it's going to be blank. But if it's greater than, tell the user something. You got to be under this. So what's nice about that is I can go ahead and just for kicks and giggles, we can go ahead and shrink these numbers down just a little bit. So you can see that as soon as I dropped below that, things went away, started being very clear in what it is that I was actually using. So really good way to harness some of those key color points is that conditional formatting stuff. So we are going to get right into the macro stuff and how to save those macros in. Do I need to pause for any questions, Jer?
No, I think you're good.
All right, perfect. So this next part is going to be, I'm going to show off a couple little things here. So this is an exported detail report showing the structure of my detail explorer to be able to put into my content binder to be able to see how our details are structured, what categories we have, and so on and so forth. But it's sort of a pain to figure out if I was going to go to page layout or a review and see what my breaks are going to be here. And let's actually reset. I need to reset this. Here. Okay, so this is what your file would typically look like, and it would just be filling a page exactly for what that page can fit. But you can see that I'm broaching the different categories here, and maybe I want to split this up so that it's a lot easier to read. Maybe I want to split these to a specific spot on a page and fit something on a page. Regardless of if it fills it or not, I want to be able to see specific categories and that kind of stuff on their own separate page. So again, with the help of the internet, I was able to find a pretty cool tool here. So this is going to be one macro that we do here. So we're just going to go to normal view for now. But let's start to understand what these actual or where these actual macros are going to live. Because if I open up my VBE here, you can see that I've got all kinds of things open. So how do I know where in the world I am here? Well, if you look up at the very top, this is going to give you a path about what it is that you're looking at right now. So I am on for detail report, right? I'm in here that is looking. If I click here, you can see that it's looking in that stuff. If I click even within for this guy here and I double click and I open him, you can see that he is in the details report workbook. I'm in module 1 code. So this is going to be your saving grace if you do have several different workbooks open, but just know that this is where you do need to make sure you are being very clean in where you're changing things and modifying things, because this is where they get affected here. But I'm going to go ahead and open up my personal workbook because I have a few different little modules here. Now, just to reiterate, a module holds, it's basically just this blank page here. So if I right click within this guy here, I can insert a module, and that module is going to be blank. And if I write sub test, let's just say this is going to be the way that you create a macro. This sub procedure here, and I'm calling it test, is now something that I'm going to do. And when I record a macro, it's doing all of this for me. So one of the macros that I recorded was make a header. So if you recall, if we go back to here and we record a macro and we give it a name, that name is what's going into that sub top line there. So if we go back then to our VBE, you can see that this is specifically the macro that it created, okay? So understanding that, I'm going to go into the module that, let's insert page break, that's the one that we want. So this is the actual macro that will run based on what it is that I actually do here. So this, we're not going to go again into too much code here, but being able to define these variables and assigning those variables to things is what is going to sort of speed up that code a little bit, and what the system's going to look for in the process that it's going to do. But in short, what this is going to do is it's going to look at column A, and it's going to look for changes in the actual content and that value. And if it finds a difference in, row 1 and 2, it will insert a page break, and it'll scan, it'll keep going down. If it finds a difference between row 35 and 36, it'll insert a page break. So that's in essence what we're doing here, and we're doing this based on column A here. So this is one of those notes with a single quote mark that will not be running code, but just as a note for you to check out. So if we were going to kind of try this out, we can go ahead and we can press the play button, and it's going to be really quick. And you're going to notice that it actually threw in these lines here. So if we went over to the view and looked at the page break view, you can see that it already did its job. And you can see that it split out and then obviously it'll break the page further than that if it needs to spill out onto the other one, but it will stop and create new pages based on the different sections. So this is a super handy one to have, not just specific to a workbook. So how in the world do we actually get it applied to anywhere, to any workbook that we do? And we want to be able to split that out. So what we're going to do is, right now, the only place that this lives is in this personal workbook right here. Okay, this is the only place that it lives, but I want to pull him out onto my ribbon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, I'm going to customize the ribbon, and I'm going to choose from what's default popular commands there. I'm going to choose macros. And you're going to see all macros that are in this instance of Excel. So anything that's open, and you're going to notice that it's defined either as the personal, or this guy is just standard. He's just in one of the workbooks that I have open. So this is where we need to be careful. This is where we need to make sure that we understand what our goal is here. Is because if we assign this autofits column macro to the ribbon and we try to run that without the actual file that this was done, so the details report, he is not going to run. You're going to get an error saying this macro doesn't exist, and it's going to cause you a bunch of problems. So we need to make sure that it lands within the personal section. So understanding that, we are focusing only on the personal, but we do need a place to put it. So where do we want to add it? Well, I don't want to necessarily add it to, unless you really want to add it to one of the existing guys here, but I do want to create a new tab. And I can rename that new tab, and we can call this one macros. Okay, so now he's here, and I've got a new group here. And this new group, why don't we call him formatting? And then I can pick a little button icon and stuff like that for it. But in here, this is where I want the specific macro to land, okay? And so if we're gonna look at this for what it is right now, this is our tab, we're in the developer tab, and these are our different groups. So they named theirs code, this group was add-ins, this one was controls. So we added a formatting group, and we're gonna find the insert page breaks guy, and we're gonna add him to this formatting group, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to add make header and autofit columns. These are the three that we're going to kind of cover, but I'm going to add them all at the same time just to save some time. But I want a little bit cleaner name than this, so I can go ahead and select him. I can rename. Go ahead and just keep it simple. All one word, and then we'll go ahead and just assign him a symbol. Makes him a little bit different. Say okay. We'll go ahead and do that to all these ones. Go ahead and pick. Let's do this one right here. Make header. And auto fit columns. There. So once we say okay to that, you're going to see that we now have a new tab, and we have these fun little buttons here. And this is our formatting group. So it's that easy to do. And since these landed in our personal Excel book, that we are going to be able to use these on no matter what file. So I can go ahead and I can come over to this guy here. If I want to come to this is going to obviously, and we'll just do this for fun, just so that it recognizes something a little bit different there. I can go ahead and I come over to this macro. I can insert page breaks, and you can see that it put them in exactly where things start to change. So that is how being able to insert those macros into the ribbon works, and how they can function across the board, keeping in mind that they've got to be in that personal workbook for them to go across the board, but you can still put buttons here workbook specific. You're just going to get errors if you try to work with them in any other workbook. So with that, I'm going to pause for a second. Are there any questions?
We did have a good question from Linda, just wondering, if you have to send a spreadsheet to someone, but don't want them to see all of your formulas and all that. And I did find one thing you can do. You can use workbook protection, which will make it impossible for someone to unhide a hidden worksheet. So if you kept all of your proprietary formulas on a hidden worksheet, you could do it that way. Otherwise, probably just send them a PDF of it. But so I thought that was a pretty good question.
Yeah, for sure. And that brings up a good point. You know, there's a lot of ways in the review tab you can do that, and this is where you're referring to here. And you can protect specific sheets. And when you do that, you can definitely not even allow them to select the locked cells. So you don't need to get into the formula cells anyways. So this is a great way to literally focus them in on only the cells that they can click on. Password protected, of course. But as soon as you start doing this and you integrate this with some of the other features like the groups or macros that start copying things and doing certain things, you're going to need to make sure that you are aware that that is one of the steps that you need to either unlock the sheet, do the commands, and then relock it as far as the macro is concerned, because sometimes the lock really does lock. So if you try to run that macro, it'll say, I can't do it because I can't move that cell or something like that. So definitely ways to do that. Just keep in mind as you're working hand in hand with that kind of stuff that you are going to have to sort of account for that. But PDFs are perfect for not being able to click and see cells. So yeah, that's great. So now I want to, we talked about creating the macro. Now we need to put that, that macro to use. Now, what if we were to, I'm gonna get over to this guy here really quick. This is a great example of something that, again, is just done manually. Maybe I wanted to reuse this guy or rerun my numbers or something like that. So I had to go through and highlight just these specific entry deals to kind of clear out my numbers to run some other stuff. Maybe I wanted to start from scratch or something. How could I do that a lot simpler? And this is one of those things that you just got to think about what processes that you're taking and kind of find what it is that you really want to save time on. So I want to be able to clear all of these cells all at the same time without having to sit there and select, because it might go down. Maybe I do have a huge long list for this type of a thing. Well, what I can do is I can make a macro do just that. So what we could do is we could record, go to our developer tab, record, and call this clear cells, and store it in this workbook, because this one would be one of those, it's going to be very unique to the columns and to the range and stuff like that. So maybe we do want to specifically store it in this, our shade template type of a thing. So I'm going to say okay. And now as I record stuff, I can highlight, and I'm just going to go down this far for now, but I can sit there and use the control tab to highlight more of those things here. And I can go ahead and do this one. And then the last one. So all I'm doing is I'm clicking all those, and then I can delete them. It's literally all I wanted to do. And then I want to start back at square one here. I can stop recording that guy. So where do I find him? Again, if you can look in your macros here and see what you have open, or you can go to your Visual Basic editor and know that we're in this shade lot, and you can see that it created that module. So if I double click on him, it's going to open him up. you're going to see that he's active here. And this is the macro that I just actually created. So I don't need a lot of this stuff. I just need, I need to select that range. I need to select this range. I need, so it's basically doing all this stuff for me. So this full range here, this is really, looks like the last, it's combining everything here. So again, take the recording for what it's worth, but this is what I need. And I don't need that guy. And I don't need that guy. This is all that I need. I just need to select this range of cells, and I need to clear that range of content. And then I need to select that guy again. So we could see what that does here. So if I leave him active, or sorry, filled out, and then I run this, and I'm going to press F8. And F8 is pretty cool because you can actually see it working right from here. So if I keep pressing F8, it's going to go to here, and it's going to do the selection. You can see that it has selected it, and then as soon as it goes past here, press F8, it'll clear them out, and then it will do that, and it'll end. So it's a pretty cool way to step through and see how it's actually functioning, if it functions. So I'm going to go ahead and undo.
That'd even be neat to assign to a button there, wouldn't it?
Oh, you
Or
wait your
oh no,
little
so you're
wait
gonna
your little heart.
uh-oh.
So here's the problem: is I just did that macro, and I can't undo. And if you remember in the first video, you got to be careful because there is no undo once a macro runs. It sort of is done, and I cannot actually get back the stuff. So I'm actually going to close without saving that guy there, and I'm going to open him back up because I want to be able to make a button to run that macro, but I want to also be able to step out of that macro before it actually runs. If I decided, oops, I shouldn't have done that type of a thing. So hopefully we can do this in 3 minutes. We are going to do this to expedite things. I'm going to go into where it is that this book lives. Here he is. We're going to make a module, and I'm fast, and all right. So, where is he at? Oh, I forgot. I made a range called clear all in this guy here. So why don't we hurry and do that one last time. So this is going to actually combine, this is a good thing to point out too, is this is actually going to combine now our knowledge of the dynamic range or the named range in reference to an actual macro in code. So those are the cells that I wanted to select every time. So I can go ahead and say clear all. And now if I use that and I call him back, he's going to select every time, which means I can use that range clear all and select. And so this is even cleaner than the other one because I now have just a reference to a name, not cells, not anything. It's just looking for this specific name. So if I go ahead and keep him there, let's keep him there. And I'm going to do one more little code here. And this is going to be show user form 1. User form 1 dot show. Okay, so what we're going to do real quick is we need to make not a module, but we need to make a user form. And this is the very basics of being able to make your own little dialog box and stuff like that. So what we want to do is we want to say click in here. Are you sure you would like to delete all cells? Okay, so that is what I want to ask the user. And they're going to be able to say either no, or I'm just going to copy him over. Yes. So we can format him and make him look really pretty. And what's nice about this is going back to how we use these buttons here is I can play and it will pop open the user form for me just to see. None of this does anything, but it's here. So I know it's working, and then it kicks me right back. So if I say no, I can double click on this and actively set another macro right within this. So I want to say unload user form 1. So now we can practice and we can go back to our double click user form and we can say play, and no should just close out, which it did. That's great. But now I want to assign this macro to this button. If I say yes, I want that stuff to run. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of this. And let's just call this clear cells. Okay. Put them in between because that won't make any sense. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. We're going to say no, didn't do anything. But if I say yes, oh, didn't do anything yet. And why is that? Because I needed to, let's just keep it in the thing that it created here for me. Okay, try it again. Yes. Ooh, syntax error. Let's try, see, that might have been messing it up. Aha. So very quickly, we can do that. Now, the only problem is, oh, it didn't close the dialog box. So I can go ahead and go into this code again. And after this code runs, I can say, or after or before, I could say unload user form 1. So then when I run it, say yes, and it hides it. So that is the basics. I know we're over. Are there any last questions with how that?
No, I think you wowed everyone, and I just I've spent my whole life doing programming. I would just definitely remind everyone here at the end. I mean, the fundamental thing to keep in mind is, yeah, it may seem like it's difficult, and you very carefully craft one line of code at a time, and but you really got to look at the big picture, and you start tweaking it like this, and you can end up with something that saves a lot of time, and it's just really helps you out. And so there's always a net payoff. So even though it seems expensive to see if you can find a Excel Visual Basic programmer out there to help you out with this, and you're like, my gosh, you're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars on that, believe me, you're going to get those hundreds and hundreds of dollars back. So I'm just definitely a big fan of custom programming myself.
Yeah, and if I can learn it, I think anybody can. It's this VBA is definitely more the simple code stuff because it is very much linear in what it's saying. It's just saying, hey, I want you to select that cell. So it's just finding that terminology and stuff like that. But it's combining all those things. It's really learning how they're recording those macros and doing stuff to where you can actually do some really cool things, and just to be able to really steer and gear the users for what they are actually doing in the workbook that you've created for them. So combination of the named ranges, the reference sheets that you're going to use to put all of your data on, to then being able to provide summary sheets and have them interact. It's all going to be a building block of everything that we've kind of talked about and just putting them in the right order. So we're happy to hear all the other comments and questions. And if you guys want to know anything else, we just would love to hear it. So thank you guys.
Exactly. Have a great weekend, everybody.